episode of DRL is brought to you by Hella Cocktail Company. At this point in the quarantine, you've probably become a teacher, a chef, a housekeeper, a hairdresser, a barista, a trainer, and so much more. But when it's time to unwind from all that, Hella Cocktail Company can turn you into a bartender, a great one. Hella Cocktail Company features premium bitters and soda, and cocktail mixes. My favorite is the spicy margarita mix. I use it to make chili watermelon margaritas, and I just add tequila, some watermelon juice, and then a few dashes of the smoked chili bitters. It's so good. Hella Bitters and Soda is now available at Whole Foods, or you can use code DRL online at hellacocktail.co for free shipping. Hello, my lovely listeners. Welcome back to another episode of DRL, where we're talking everything dating, relationships, and love. I'm your host, Tennesha Wood. I'm not really sure where to start this week. It's obviously been a heavy week, a tragic week, a sad week. 2020 has been no picnic, but everything that's happened this week has just really added stress. And rest in peace to George Floyd. And I hope Amy Cooper ends up exactly where she needs to be, which is in jail. And, Christian Cooper has me thinking about why I've never been bird watching. So perhaps that's something I'll try. So with everything that's been happening, I've been really trying to find some sort of positive light. And so I revisited some of the old episodes from the past 4 years of DRL. And the ones that really stuck out to me were the ones about interracial relationships. Because if these couples can navigate through their differences, maybe that can spread to the world. Maybe the world can learn to do the same thing. And maybe that will alleviate the violence. Maybe that will spread love. At least that's my hope. So I'm going to share 3 of these episodes. I'm just sharing some of the clips that I really enjoyed from these episodes, but the full episodes are still available on all platforms. And then I'll also share the links in the show notes. You guys might remember Margaret from season 3, episode 41. Margaret and her husband have been together for over 18 years, and she shares how the dynamics around race really shifted throughout the course of their relationship. And she also shares how having children changed some of her interactions with her white friends. So the other thing I remember from when I first met you, right? So I met you, and then a couple months later, I was invited to, I think, a game night or something that was happening at your house. I don't remember what the exact event was. Yeah. And so I went to your house with Vanessa, and then I met your husband, and I was blown away when I realized your husband was white.
I know. You told me that at the Bachelorette, and it made me think, I wonder if everyone has this reaction, but Tanisha's the only person who told me. And then, I have a lot of old friends. Right. So they've known me before Thomas, and they know Thomas. They've seen the relationship. So I'm like, oh, my God, I bet a lot of the new people I meet have that similar reaction and just don't tell me.
Yeah, I think in my mind, and this sounds very stereotypical, but you imagine a certain type of person with a certain type of person. Yeah. You know what I'm saying?
Absolutely.
And so there is a guy I guess I could see you with based on not knowing you, just straight up looking at you. I'm like, I could guess who her husband would be if I walked into a room. Yeah. And so I was just really surprised at it. And now in sort of knowing your work and your writings and the things that you dedicate your life to, it seems in some ways like there might be some conflict there racially. So how did you end up with a white man?
I was a junior in college, and there was this foreign study program opportunity in Trinidad. There were 8 of us, and we were all English majors, and we could go to Trinidad or like Scotland for 4 months, and I chose Trinidad. Kind of being in line with who I was. There was no question to me that I would choose Trinidad.
We're not going to go Scotland.
Right. I just knew for a fact when I got there, I would meet a Trinidadian man and we would probably get married. I just knew that. And the man, you know, would have dreadlocks. I had dreadlocks. You know, at that time, that song Brown Skin was really popular. That India.Arie Brown Skin song. I was like, this is obviously going to be the music video. And, you know, this will be awesome. But I get to Trinidad. There actually was a guy like this. There was a guy that was a Colgate student. His name was like Caleb, I think. I had a crush on Caleb. My husband knows this. I had a crush on Caleb. He had dreadlocks. He was black. He wasn't Trinidadian, but, you know, the same sort of thing. He had come from his school to do this foreign study program. And we were there for the same amount of time. And we lived in the same dorm. And so I was like, oh, this is him. There we go. I mean, we never even saw each other. Like, it was definitely like more of a imaginary crush situation. Right. We never had any kind of interaction or any kind of meaningful relationship. It was on that
baby, baby, baby.
Yeah.
I look a lot different outside my college clothes.
Exactly. But meanwhile, I'm hanging out with this group of 8 people every day. We go everywhere together and, you know, we take classes together. We go to the movies every Wednesday. It's like we get to be so tight. And the person that I'm closest to in the group is this guy, Thomas. And we're just like best friends. Like, we're always on the same page. I think he's so funny. I laugh at all his jokes. I would say about a month and a half into the trip, I realized that I liked him. Mm-hmm. And I was like, you know, I like him, but this is obviously not going anywhere. This is in 2002. So it wasn't really common for the interracial relationships the way it is now. Like, now, if I had a 22-year-old little cousin who had a crush on a white guy, I would be like, yeah, go for it. Who cares? Like, you know, but it was different back then. And, I was like, this obviously isn't going anywhere. So I didn't even tell anybody about it. I didn't tell, like, normally when I have a crush on somebody, I tell everybody. I talk about it so much, I just drain it of all its power, right? I didn't tell anybody. And I actually think that's why it worked. Like, I wasn't like obsessing over it because I didn't think it was a possibility. Mm. And so we just kept hanging out as friends.
Do you think he liked you at that point?
At that time, I didn't think so. No. He says now that he did, and I believe him. But at that time, no. I don't know if that was like racial brainwashing or insecurity in general. I don't know what that was, but I thought, you know, this is just not going to happen.
Even though you all were technically at the same place in life.
Exactly.
Because you were both at the school, both doing this program.
Yeah. I think what it was, because he was a white guy, I thought, I'm not his type. Like, I thought he likes skinny white girls, obviously, and I'm not a skinny white girl. And there were plenty of them on our trip. So I thought that's probably who he'll end up with. And I didn't even want to like play myself by getting invested. So we always were the ones who wanted to go out and
you
drink.
And Thomas.
Yes, we always were the ones who wanted to go out and drink and have fun. And one night we were trying to rally the group up and they didn't want to go. And it ended up just being the 2 of us going on this bus to this club, Coconuts, in Trinidad. And I was feeling like, oh, he's going to think I planned this just to like...
She didn't really invite any of those other people.
I was like so paranoid about it. And so we're on the bus ride. I think we're drinking on the bus and we get there. We stand at the bar and we have this conversation. And it became clear to me in that conversation that he was feeling me as well. It became
What was
very
the conversation?
Obvious. I don't remember the conversation, but I remember the vibe. And it was very clear to me at that moment. And then I think we went out as a group a couple of days later. My roommate at the time, who was a white girl, told me after I was dancing with this random Trinidadian guy, she was like, you know, Thomas was staring at you the whole time you were dancing with that guy. And she was like, ooh. Yeah, she was like, Margaret, if you dated Thomas, he would treat you like a queen. She told me that. I don't know. It was interesting that she said that because it definitely was like planting a seed.
Now, at that point, you'd never dated a white man or even thought about it. Or had you thought about it before him? Was it something even on your radar?
No, not really. I mean, I'm thinking in high school there was a white guy that I had a crush on, but this is out of like, this was probably a 1-month crush out of like, you know, 20 guys I hadn't been involved with, not sexually, but 20 guys I had been involved with at that time.
Right.
It was no, I didn't date white guys. No, the answer is no.
So then in a way, were you scared? It sounded like in the process, you were maybe kind of scared, like, I've never done this. What is this? How do I do this? What was the apprehension that you had?
I think the apprehension was knowing that I was going to have to join that world in a way. And I didn't want to do that. And I still don't.
And when you say that world, do you mean the white world? Or
yeah. Yeah, because even though it's funny, I had gone to predominantly white schools. I went to a predominantly white high school. I went to a predominantly white college. But we always found our people, there were like 20 Black people in my high school. Maybe there were 30. We all hung out together. I had some white friends that were on the fringes. Like, maybe they were, like I had a friend who was Russian and Jewish. And so she wasn't really part of the mainstream white culture at that school.
She was like out on the outer skirts.
Right. But like, I didn't hang out with white people. I didn't feel comfortable really with, the mainstream white culture. And this is how it was. At Dartmouth, all the Black people hung out together. I knew that it was going to be me joining that world. I knew that it would be, even then, I knew it would be me joining that world more than him joining mine. Mm-hmm. I already had a sense for that. And that is what it turned out to be until recently. I didn't know how racist the world was until I started dating my husband, because I see the discrepancy.
Right there in your face, right next to each other.
Yeah. Normally I'm with a Black woman. They're treating us both however they're treating us.
Right.
I don't have the frame of reference. So I just think, they're treating us both however they're treating us. But when I saw the difference, I think about it a lot because it's something that really could have torn down the relationship, the stress that puts on a relationship.
Did he notice it?
No.
Did you guys have those conversations in the early days?
Yes, we did. But a lot of the conversations in those days, because this is in the early 2000s. So there's so much language around it now. And he's so much more woke now than he was. But also there's just so much language now about microaggression. We didn't have that kind of language. A lot of it was him trying to help me by counseling me out of like letting it affect me. That was how he was handling it for years. At that time, I just didn't understand how dismissive and undermining that was. We have both come to see that. Thomas and I have both come to see that now. But at the time, I thought, yeah, I'm too sensitive around these issues. I really did think that. I'm too sensitive around these issues. And, I want to work toward being less sensitive around these issues.
It sounds like you guys were both putting a Band-Aid on it at that point and not exploring the deeper issues or the deeper meanings, but it was just like, okay, in this moment, somebody just treated you in a different way than they treated me. So let's just put a quick little Band-Aid on that and move on from it.
Exactly.
Versus really digging into like why it's happening, how you're feeling about it, and why it's important.
And then also like, what are we going to do about it as a couple? Because it wouldn't have been possible to sustain that type of disparate treatment over the course of our dating life and our marriage without it taking the relationship down. I really don't believe that. So we had to start to address it differently as a couple as time went on. And so she was very hard on Thomas the first year, maybe 2 years, very hard on Thomas. She wanted to make sure he was treating me well. She was very suspicious that he wouldn't be treating me well. And I think some of that was race. I think some of that was just, the way she deals with men in general. But I think a lot of it was race. I think she wanted to make sure I was being treated well. And she assumed that his family would have a problem with it. And she was always very protective of me in that way. Mm. And they didn't, but she was always very protective of me. I told him I had been dating someone, and he said, "Oh, you found a Black man at Dartmouth?" And I said, "Oh, he's not Black." And he said, "Oh, okay, well, at least tell me he's Latino." And I said, no.
Then he's like, well, at least tell me he's Asian. Indian, something.
He like went through the groups, and I was like, no, he's white. And he was like, he just blew up. He was like, what? And you call yourself all cultural? That's what he said. He's like, and you call, because, I had the dreadlocks and all that stuff. He was like, oh, you call yourself so cultural, and you're out here dating a white boy. And, I kind of went off on him. I don't remember what I said, but I went off on him. I was very protective of Thomas, and I went off on him. And I don't regret it. I mean, I think he overstepped, but I get it more now. I think I was just living in La La Land out of a need to protect myself from what was out there because I was afraid of it.
You said that once you guys had children is when things really started to shift in probably how you guys saw each other's world.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I mean, before I got pregnant, we spent a lot of time hanging out with my husband's white friends. And, I had my own group of Black girlfriends as well. But when we hung out as a couple, it was primarily with my husband's white friends, who had come to be my own friends as well. I was thinking about this last night. I was often the only Black person and Black woman in those groups. And I thought I felt comfortable with it at the time. Like I said, I had my own group of friends, so it wasn't like my sole source of support, but it wasn't always the greatest fit. And I didn't quite understand why until later. Now, once I got pregnant, a lot of that hanging out just naturally stopped because I'm pregnant, and a lot of it was centered around drinking and stuff. And then we moved to Oakland just to buy a house. We moved to Oakland because we were going to have 2 kids. So once we moved to Oakland, a lot of that shifted too because the friends were in San Francisco. Most of my Black friends were in Oakland. It just kind of shifted circumstantially. And then once I had the children, it was like, I just changed completely. It became very important to me for my children to be around people who thought about race in a progressive way and who understood race in a very deep and enlightened way. And also, I feel like I had these little precious beings who were Black, little babies, and they needed to be around enlightened behavior. And I just started to like see how in certain ways I hadn't been around enlightened behavior and hadn't really been picky enough about it myself in protecting myself from it. And I started to see ways in which I had sort of been shrinking myself in these environments. And once I understood that, it was impossible to go back.
Wow.
I still see them. I still love them dearly. I do. But I would never put myself in a situation at this stage of my life where I'm the only Black person in a group and we're hanging out on a consistent basis. It's just not going to happen.
Right.
I always tell my husband this. It's not a natural group. If it's an all-white group like that, that's not natural. Like the fact that I'm their only Black friend, there's something very disturbing about that. And I don't want to be in that kind of environment. You know what I mean? Like that means that you've spent 30 some odd years navigating this world, never having come across someone who's not, very specific, like you in a very specific way.
Living in a major city.
Yeah. And I'm like, somehow you were able to do that. Me being here, it doesn't feel like a naturally designed orchestration of events. I just don't feel like you really get it if I'm the only Black person that you're friends with. And that was the case. Like I was the only Black person a lot of these people were friends with. I think it can be traumatic to keep putting oneself into those situations, overly. I think, here and there it's fine. And of course, family is different. But I think it just had to be more balanced. And now it's very, very balanced. So it's been good. And I think he likes my friends a lot, but he definitely never feels that anxiety. I'm always waiting for someone to say something inappropriate. And there are only so many times when you're going to challenge yourself to say something. It's not something I think where every single time a white person said something inappropriate, I don't always correct them. I would say maybe 30% of the time I correct them. 70% of the time I probably react differently. I either let it go or whatever. I remove myself from the situation. But I don't think we have the energy to correct white people every single time. I mean, it would be my life's work, right? So
what are you? I'm a white corrector.
Right? And it's just too much. I don't want to be in that situation all the time. So yeah, but he doesn't have to do that. When he's in a group of Black people, and by the way, he works like in diversity and inclusion with a group of Black people. And when he's in those groups, he's not re-stimulated. He's not triggered. Like he's not dealing with generations of white supremacy and what that looks like in terms of how he'll be targeted. Mm-hmm. So it's totally different. It's just like a cleaner experience.
So now you put out your first book in 2017,
yes.
And it was called A Kind of Freedom.
Mm-hmm.
And that book touched a lot on race and segregation and how that all occurs through generations. So had you always wanted to write in that way and about that subject matter and having race kind of be a thread through your work? Or do you think that came to you based on your experience maybe with your husband or being in white spaces predominantly growing up?
I've always been a race person. Like it's growing up in New Orleans. Growing up in New Orleans in the 80s, New Orleans was pretty segregated, and it's growing up with the parents I grew up with too. My mother talked about race constantly. It's funny, since Thomas has come into our lives, my mother doesn't even see race anymore. But and she's always like, Margaret, why are you so into race? And I'm like, I was watching the movie Roots at the age of 7. Like
that's why I'm so into race.
So I mean, it's just the way I grew up. I see everything through that filter. Everything through that filter. When I walk into any room, I'm always thinking about race. Who's in the room according to race? And I in some ways, I wish I could get out of it because it's a prison in some ways. But that's why I write about that stuff, because I'm always thinking about it. It's not even. I don't even think I could write about anything else.
Mike and Megan came on for season 3, episode 7, back in February 2019. Sadly, what was happening when they met echoes what is still happening today. So they met in the summer of 2016, and it was right after Alton Sterling and Philando Castile had been murdered by the police within days of each other. And at the time, Megan had never dated a black man, and so she wasn't sure how to approach this with Michael.
After being here for a couple months, realized I should probably get out there, put myself out there, and I was on Bumble, and I just thought to myself, this is all these broy guys that I went to Georgetown with, and I just don't like. Where creative people? Where are the entrepreneurial people? Where is something other than these white guys? Like not that I don't know. It's like not that I would like need something else, but it just wasn't really resonating.
I reached out to Megan. There were a bunch of mutual friends that we had in common. Megan was in her photos so bubbly and positive and world traveled, and it was just like not that I was trying to fit someone in a mold, but had so many characteristics on surface level on advertising that resonated with me. And I, from the moment I reached out to her, was like, every exchange here is going to be intentional. After going through probably 2 years of dating that was more, sad to say, but probably more transactional, or even, I don't know, like trying to fill some void emotionally. And when I reached out to you, it was like having a strong sense of what I was looking for.
Also, both of us were ready for something meaningful.
We had a really awesome, passionate night of texting, getting into...
Did you just say a passionate night of texting?
I did.
You're a little over.
I love it. I love it, though.
It's a little cheesy, but
no,
that's what
I
it
think
felt
that's
like.
cute.
When I reflect on the memory of it, I don't remember the words that were exchanged verbatim, but when I think about it, it was like, wow, there was something really connecting about that exchange.
So it was the summer of 2016. That week, there were 2 or 3 different police brutality / murders that happened. And I had never dated a black man before. It was not something I either avoided or fetishized. It was just, I grew up in a suburb that was predominantly white. I went to a college that was predominantly white, and then it just my social circles ended up being that way. And it's something that I'm very much aware of now, and not something that I'm looking to continue, but that was really challenging for me because I was really grieving that week. And for me, it didn't feel fair to have that conversation with somebody I'd never met before, and somebody that I felt it was not my place to put that additional grief on him. And I actually was pretty conflicted. So it wasn't that I was necessarily trying to avoid. I was more sorting through stuff internally and grieving and not wanting to project that onto somebody else, because I knew that that's kind of all I wanted to talk about.
Right.
And we did talk about it a bit, and I thought it was really connecting, but it was also for me a sense of empathy for you in a way, in that this was a reality for me for so long. This summer had come to a fever pitch, but it wasn't a shock to me. So to the extent that you were grieving, it was something that I wanted to explore further, but in a way wasn't completely connecting with, but really appreciated that you were going deeper with it. And that was an area that us, even not having met one another, I was grateful for the fact that you were willing to go deeper into that conversation.
I simply did not want to be that person that was trying to find solace in a person of color to make me feel better. That was really important for me to not do that. And so it was hard, but it was hard for me, I think, initially to even share that. But it actually ended up being something that was important in our early days of navigating a really meaningful interracial
Right.
dynamic.
Was Megan the first white woman that you've dated, or was that also new for you in the way it was for her?
So no, Megan wasn't the first white woman that I had dated, but on our very first date, we got super real, super quick, and I conceded. I shared that in the past I hadn't gone super deep in a relationship with a white woman because I didn't want to be sort of judged by their parents. I had this phobia. I'm a proud Jamaican. I'm really proud of my background, and I don't want to put myself ever in a situation where someone is making me to feel smaller.
Right.
So because of that, I'd avoided going deeper in relationships with white women. And I shared that on our first date.
I think that's great that you guys were able to be so open on the first date. I'm like a first date, put it all out there, and if somebody doesn't like it, great. Like, we won't waste each other's time.
100%.
And now, if you do like it, great. You know the real me. You got it up front, and you know what you're getting into. So
that was a lot of the article that I shared. And one really funny story about parental meeting. Michael hadn't met I think he had met my mom, but he hadn't met my dad yet.
Can I just ask? I gotta ask a question.
Sure.
And I've always wondered this. So, if you're bringing a person of a different race home, do you forewarn?
Obviously, you saw Get Out, and she
Yes.
didn't tell her parents, and you're like, really?
What was their reaction though when you told them?
I don't remember with my mom. My mom is incredibly open and wonderful, and my entire family has been so welcoming and absolutely love Michael. And I had a conversation with my stepmom. Was actually the first person that I had set, like, between my dad and my stepmom, and because I have had interactions with her that have felt borderline
Racist?
uncomfortable. and I told her first. I said I want to bring Michael home, and I want him to feel comfortable, and he's Black, and I care a lot about him, and I think there's something there, and it's really important to me that there's nothing but respect, and it certainly was one of those, like, challenging conversations. She said, if it's somebody that cares about you and is a good person who cares about you, then it doesn't matter what they're.
So it was overall supportive.
It was. But so the first time that Michael, like, met my dad virtually was on my birthday, about 2 months after we met, and Michael's taking me out to dinner, and my dad FaceTimed. So we're walking to dinner, and do you remember this?
Of course.
Okay. So we're walking to dinner, and my dad's FaceTiming, so I have my earbuds in and the phone out, and he was like, "Oh, you're going out with you've been going out with Michael." He had heard about him, and he said, "Put him on. I want to see him."
I was scared as shit.
So my dad's in, like, half retirement. He lives in San Luis Obispo, California, in, like, the most chill place on earth. And Michael gets on the phone. My dad is sitting with, he's like with it's a Saturday.
He's sipping like a gin and tonic.
He's sipping a gin and tonic. It's a Sunday afternoon. He has this, like, big old sun umbrella behind him, just, like, being like such an old white guy. And Michael, like, after he got off the phone, he's like, "Yo, your dad's like George Bush."
But
So his interaction though was between you guys. It was
the
good.
interactions have always been amazing, and like unfortunately, the word that comes to my mind is, like, refreshingly so. My mom actually talked to me about interracial dating when I was a little kid.
What did she say?
I remember when I was a kid, my mom said something to me where she was like, "Micah, just promise me something."
That's how a Jamaican mom always starts.
Promise me something.
Lifelong promises when you're 4.
If you want a white woman, plenty of light-skinned black woman out there.
That's hilarious. How old old were you? Just
I
out
did
of
not know
curiosity.
this.
When she said this, how old were you?
It was probably like 6 years old or something like that. The reason I wanted to bring it up though is that we all have biases that we bring in. So like I came into our relationship, I happened to share it right away, but I'm like, look, I got these fears around judgment. I've got pride that I'm bringing to the table. I probably didn't talk about my mom and like the guidance she was giving me in dating at age 6. And then like when it was time to meet your parents, I was already filling it with stories that never came true. So I don't know. I think one big thing in our relationship has been like upfront confronting like the societal narrative that's projected on us, such that if we were actually to pursue a relationship with one another intentionally, that it was going to be on our interactions and not on
The world and how the world sees
projections on us, even if it meant some difficult conversations early.
What's true for us as individuals, what's true for us combined, and there's so many things that you're socialized to believe about how relationships are meant to work, or how family dynamics are meant to work.
Well, there's a certain block, and then we think we all have to fit in that block. So it's like, you know, you meet somebody in your 20s, and then by your 30s you get married, and then you have kids, and that person is supposed to look very much like you and be from the same culture and the same religion, and then you have your kids, and it's just, there's a system that's built, and we feel like if we don't fit into that system, maybe there's something wrong. And it's like, no, you can create your own system.
We had a little bit of tension, and you can sense that, but a lot of times in relationships you sense this like kind of pulling away, and it's like, what do? You protect your heart. And
what was the tension over that weekend? It was kind of like a class thing. It wasn't like different classes, but we ended up going to Montauk because I was gifted a hotel stay,
and I'd never been to the Hamptons before ever.
Mm-hmm. And I had, but I hadn't been to Montauk in years, and it had changed so much. It used to be really, really low key, and all these like fish shacks and things like that. When we got there, it was like everything was extra. And
like what?
You could not go out to eat for a reasonable, or everything was like white tablecloth. Everything was fancy, and it was tense. It was like, this was actually meant to be pretty low key, but it was
a weekend where a lot of new things like unfolded, right? So I shared something in my past about my partying habits that was a little bit jarring for you. Mm-hmm. I was a bit like beaten down by this. I left my wallet in the hotel room, not on purpose, just by forgetting it. And so then I didn't have money to pay for things, which like I was already kind of feeling a little bit insecure being in this like kind of like hoity-toity vacation thing. Right. I grew up in Brooklyn, so like Montauk, like I don't know. It's just like for me, again, these biases and stigmas and stories that I tell myself were coming up so fucking strong.
Right. I think for both of us, like when that night when we were going out, it was like the night that we were going out to dinner, and when he had forgotten his wallet, I just had like something came up for me around just wanting to have somebody. I like that, like there was a sense that I was meant to be taken care of. I feel shame that I even say that or maybe even feel that, but for me, I was like, well, I feel like I don't even really know how to express it, but that was something that was coming up for me in that moment, that like we're going out to dinner, like I kind of treated you to this weekend sort of thing, or I don't know, like it was like,
I don't even know how to express what you're feeling, but I understand it. Even though it wasn't intentional.
It was an accident. He had so much cash. He's like, I can get you like as soon as we get back.
There is a feeling that you have in that moment that you feel like how you take it is this person doesn't want to take care of me, and therefore maybe they don't like me like that, or maybe they don't think I'm worthy.
And it's also also clearly a gender role thing.
100%.
That the man takes care of a woman. He brings his wallet. He treats her.
Yeah, and I would say I had a lot of shame in that scenario because it wasn't It really wasn't intentional.
But based on her reaction, you started feeling...
Just based on your reaction, and then just like growing up as a black man that's been in white environments for my entire life, I'm always hyper conscious about how I tip, how I pay, like, you know, how accomplished I am is definitely. So it was a sort of thing where it was like it was an oversight on my part, but then I felt like a bit of resentment on my side for like how much shame I had to feel, even though I was trying to explain where I was coming from.
Totally.
And then I was in an environment that I'd never been in. I was meeting more of your friends who looked like Ken dolls, and you know, and like or you know, just who ended up being really amazing people. But me meeting them on this first time in this environment where I'm out of place, I've never been here before. It was tough.
Yeah.
It was tough. And I remember taking the Long Island Railroad back at home and just like running through my head.
Separately.
So she was there for an extra day. That was planned.
Oh, got it.
And but I just remember feeling so insecure and like going on Instagram to see like what stories she was posting. And
so how did you guys get past that? Because a lot of people in that situation then would have been like, this is early enough for me to run.
So it got weird, and like Megan got a little bit distant. I don't think I was like overly reaching, but I was just like, yo, I still very much care about you. But I could sense that something was off. And it was like a Monday night, and I remember I got home. It was like 9 or 10, and I texted Megan throughout the day just to kind of let her know. And then like the text cadence like changed in the evening, and it was like she had texted me maybe at like 6:30 or something, or 7, and then didn't text me again until 10:30. And I was like, "Were you on a date tonight?" Because there was such a distance between.
Ooh. You went bold with it. Like, you weren't just like, hey, why didn't you text me back? You're like, are you on a date? Because you were gone between 7 and 10. Those are prime date hours. And between 7 and 10 p.m., you clearly are on a date. Where else are you at between 7 and 10 p.m. on a random night?
I'm super embarrassed now.
I know how your mind works.
I feel super embarrassed. But I did say, I was like, look, I know that, like, we haven't been dating very long, and I probably shouldn't ask this. I'm like, do I have permission to ask what's on my mind? I remember actually like sending that question ahead, and you said yes, go for it. And then I said, were you on a date tonight?
And she said,
I was.
How did you feel about that?
I felt like I wasn't owed anything otherwise, but I still felt really hurt. I felt like a punch in my stomach, and it wasn't imbalanced. It was totally fair. We both had talked about dating and not going too quickly, but then having that feeling was telling for me about how I felt about Megan.
So one of the things that I really like about you guys as a couple, I'm going to name all of them actually. Oh. The first one is your willingness to confront things, right? Because a lot of people at a lot of points in your relationship or what you've shared thus far would have been like, I'm making assumptions. I'm not talking about that. This is how I feel. And then kind of create a story in their head, go on that story. And next thing you know, the relationship doesn't exist. So I really like that, the willingness and openness to talk about things. The second thing is the vulnerability that you guys have with each other, where it's just like, yeah, not only like we're going to really talk about it. We're not just going to be like, so, blah, 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 you know, this is how I fake feel. Like you really talk about it, and you really like, you don't shy away from the things that might cause angst or pain or anger. Like you roll right into it, you talk about it, and you deal with it.
I feel like people go and like spend money and put themselves in situation to increase this like adrenaline in their body, like jump out of planes, like just sit down in front of your partner and have a real conversation. Like think about the thing that you don't want to talk about, and then talk about it.
Yeah.
And see what that feels like. See what that feels like throughout your body. You know what I mean?
Tune into it and actually like.
Because the question really is not, it's never the what. So it's not like, yes, I'm feeling jealousy. I know the what, but why? And why in me? Not what did you do to make me feel like that, but like, why am I jealous? Do I feel like I don't trust now? Like the why, and you got to dig and dig and dig and dig.
But here, I'll even go a step deeper, is that like, there's a ton of fear and discomfort in approaching that deeper dig. But when you scrape the surface and start going deeper past it, so now you've gotten past fear and now you're learning what happens once you get past that fear. I feel like there's no ecstasy like it. It's like getting the opportunity to speak in front of a crowd, hating it, but then hearing the applause afterwards and being like, wow, I did that. You know, that's what
connecting too as a couple. It's like couples drugs to share and open up to each other in like a really, really vulnerable way. And that's like not yelling at each other. You did this, you did that. But this is bringing up things for me and then really, really sharing where those might have come from. And you come through that process. There's nothing like it to be able to share with another human being, to really, really, truly be vulnerable with each other and share things that you're afraid of and share things that are real for you that maybe you've never shared with somebody else.
Right.
Like that's you the connection that you can feel with another person is unbelievable.
Kara came on season 1, episode 53 back in February 2017, and this was right after Trump was elected. And her boyfriend's family did not share her political views. In other words, they might have voted for Trump. You guys have been together for
a long
forever,
time.
ever?
Forever, ever?
Forever, ever? Like years?
Like years.
How many years?
8 years. This year.
I didn't realize it was that long.
Yeah, this year.
8 years?
Yeah.
Girl, I have not done anything for 8 years of my life.
I know.
Like nothing.
It's crazy.
Like not even lived in one city. How did things progress from there?
After that day, I feel like we hung out every single day. After that, we hung out every day. We just hung out, shoot the shit, would put music on, dance, just like hang out.
Now, did race come up early on?
No.
Not at all.
It wasn't a thing. It was never a thing until we moved in together. And then we moved to 132nd between 7th and 8th, and that's it's an area that's more populated by people of color. It was like Harlem. We moved to the new neighborhood. The brothers on the block used to be like, why are you dating him? Stuff like that. And that's when we first started to experience like just discrimination because we were together. I had an uncomfortable conversation with my boyfriend's family before. And I know that if I have a child with him, our children will be black. And that will change the dynamic of their life. Yes? No matter what, it will. And they need to know what it's like to have a black grandchild. You know what I mean? Like, automatically, they'll just have to know. And what their rights will be. And how they should be treated. And what they should know. And how they should be loved by the world.
It's going to come up. And it has to.
It has to.
So it's the pushing under the rug. It can't go on for
You're
that much
absolutely
longer.
right.
It just can't. Because it's going to hit them in the face one day. Like, honestly, and I hate to say it like this, but I would hate for the day that it hits them in the face to be when they're out with their grandchild and somebody says something out of pocket or calls their grandchild out of their name, and they're like, whoa, how do I handle this?
Well, T, I will tell you that it's those kind of conversations will definitely happen when they're walking around with their black grandchild. It will definitely happen, especially after this election, when people are being called names and they're like, what? What kind of... Where are we live? What world are we living in? My only problem is that I feel like there is a level of ignorance that they want to have because they don't want to engage in these conversations. I think I can tell that to their faces. It's very highly likely that they might listen to this eventually. But I think that there's a level of ignorance, and in these situations, ignorance is bliss, right? In a certain way.
Ignorance is death.
Ignorance is also death. But in regards to the white family living in middle America, the government and the media protects them so that they don't know that much.
What a luxury.
What a luxury.
What a luxury that is.
They protect them to not know. And some choose to remain not knowing. Whether that is not picking up the paper and reading it every day, not looking at the feed. If I look at your Facebook feed and you look at my Facebook feed, they're going to look like two different Facebook feeds. You know what I mean? And so people are getting their information, especially, I don't want to, like, they are getting their information from that, but that's how people pick up information. And so, and if you watch Fox News, if you watch your local television
It's a bubble.
shows, it's a bubble.
You're in your own bubble of this is what affects my world.
Right, right. But for some reason, I feel like I can't touch that bubble like that because I have to protect I don't know. Does that sound weird? I kind of just don't want to engage in those conversations because I feel like my relationship means more to me than if you voted for Trump. I'm choosing not to speak about the certain instance, but to protect those, right? But I have been very vocal about Black Lives Matter, specifically to them. I know that they probably don't really understand the movement at all. I have definitely tried to inform them of the realities of the world that I live in and the world that my brother lives in and my father lives in as people of color, so that they can grasp that my brother and my father have every feeling to fear their lives on a daily basis. I needed to tell them that. They needed to hear that,
right?
Because they have no clue what that feels like. They don't know about the hard, cold realities of being a person of color living in America is like. They have no idea. I've been very vocal about that. But when it comes to like politics and stuff like that, I tend not to get in their way because they've chosen to protect that from me.
Right.
They protect it from me, from me. You know what I mean? Because they already know how liberal I am. They already know I come from a liberal New York City. I'm a New York City chick. I take no shit. You know, they know.
I want to talk about your relationship itself and your boyfriend and where you see things going and what you guys like to do and all that. So tell me about him.
He's very artistic, very, it's a really nice guy. Like a genuinely sweet, caring, loving individual. And he's just like I don't know, he's just so perfect. Like he has a different pace. Like I'm like, I gotta be here at like 8 o'clock and then like 8:30 I gotta go here and like I gotta do this, but I'm a workaholic. Like I work way too much and I work till I'm tired and like I need to take like a day off so that I can recoup. But that I can go like months and months without a day off, you know? Where he's like chill and he'll like, you know, paint and like make jewelry and like he just has a different pace in life, which is totally good for me because he calms me down. Ultimately, that's really what happens. I'm crazy and he's cool, you know? And he just really takes care of me. He takes care of my well-being. He takes care of my mental well-being. We went on that trip to ATO and then drove to North Carolina. And he knew. I said, baby, do you have socks, babe? He's like, yep, I do. I knew that you would ask for it. He had low-top socks for me packed in his suitcase that he brought from LA at the time because he knew that I would need socks. He packed an extra toothbrush because he knew that I would forget mine. He does shit like that to me it's like,
always thinking of you.
Always thinking of me.
And what you're going to need. So that is it for today. Thank you for listening. Thank you for being supportive. And please reach out to me and let me know what you think of the show at Tennesha Wood on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. And until next time, wish me love.
Hello again, my lovely listeners. Thank you so much for tuning in to today's episode of DRL. If you like the show, be sure to go on iTunes and leave a rating and also write a review. And don't forget to share with your friends and tell them all about DRL. Thank you so much for supporting.